of the positive things for me that came out of 9/11 is violence is not the answer. It never has been. All it does is create more violence. It doesn't make any difference at what level you look at it. Take it down to your home. Arguments, discussions is okay to a degree. But when you add violence to the disagreement, it just begets more violence. And maybe that's the Mennonite in me, but violence never creates peace.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the 8 Decades podcast. I'm your host, Josiah Freeland, and in this mini podcast series, I'm sitting with my grandpa, Steve Freeland, to explore the past 80 years of American history, looking at it from his perspective and sharing a few of his personal stories. In this 6th episode, we're going to be diving into the 2000s decade, 2000 to 2009. You're going to hear stories about the first iPhone release, the impact of the Great Recession, and 9/11. And those are just a few of the stories you're going to hear about in this episode. To begin, we're going to start off with one of the most defining moments of this decade, which we all know of, September 11th, 2001. This was a day that changed the world.
The one that crashed in Pennsylvania, one of the leaders of the caused the plane to crash, one of the passengers, a guy by the name of Todd Beamer, went to school in Fresno, had been a student at Fresno State. I don't know if he was in the Army or if he was I think he was in the Navy, that was killed in the Pentagon, played football at Fresno State. He wasn't a star player, but he was on the Fresno State team and did play. And his wife, I think she was from Hanford or Lemoore. She might have been from Fresno, but she was from this area also. I think they probably met at Fresno State. But yeah, I could recount the morning hours of 9/11. Connie was backing out of the driveway, and I was backing out also. And she stopped in the middle of the street and yelled up to me that she had just heard on the radio that a plane had crashed into the Twin Towers. Nobody realized at that time that it was intentional. Supposedly, at any given time, there's up to 50,000 people in that building, or in those two buildings. I guess maybe it is. As it turned out, because of the time of day and the day that this was a Monday, there weren't as many people in the building as was typical. And by the time I got to work, which was 10 or 15 minutes, I pretty much had just walked in the door and at work, and the second plane hit the second tower, and it was clear by then that it's not a coincidence. And then shortly after that, the third plane hits the Pentagon. And not much work got done that day. Later, the plane crashed in Pennsylvania. I don't remember how long. It was just, an hour, maybe hour and a half later, the plane in Pennsylvania went down. And by the time after the Pentagon plane crashed, they shut down air flight in the United States. Didn't make any difference where, if you were flying, where the plane was, you get to land at the nearest airport, period.
Yeah.
And so they scrambled armed jets in the D.C. area they were making precautions for shooting down aircraft if necessary. So when the one in Pennsylvania, when it went down, it just fell off the radars, and nobody knew whether it had crashed somewhere, whether it was coming in too low into D.C. to be tracked, whether somebody had shot it down. For a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, they had no idea where the one in Pennsylvania was. And what's the saying? Oh, there was a saying that came out of the Pennsylvania plane. People on the Pennsylvania flight, they had heard by their cell phones and talking to people on the ground, the other planes had crashed, and that, of course, those in the plane in Pennsylvania, that had already been taken over, so they knew that there was hijacking there. And the male passengers on the plane, in the back of the plane, they knew they were going to die, and so there wasn't any way out of that, and they made the decision to rush the cockpit, and one of the hijackers, one or two, I'm not sure which was guarding the door into the cockpit, and they the passengers, when they decided that's what they were going to do, that they were going to sacrifice their lives for the saving of others if the plane was going to crash at Capitol or wherever. And of course, they're talking to people at their home or wherever on the cell phones, and they're telling whoever they're talking to what they're going to do. And Todd Beamer is heard to say they got a food cart to use as to ram the guard at the cockpit. And what was it he says?
Let's roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no way of knowing at this point how many lives they saved. They certainly saved a lot.
I asked my grandpa this. What was it like the days, the weeks, and the months following these events?
Well, when it became clear who had done this, and it became clear in a day or two. I mean, it was very, very quickly. The United States was able to determine who did it and why. And if you happened to be a Middle Eastern, your life was in peril in the United States. Because if you were from Saudi Arabia or Palestine or any of the Arab countries, you were an enemy. And it didn't make any difference whether you were American citizen or not. Your life was in peril. And so there was a lot of unjustly attacked people. There were probably some that were killed. I don't remember. And it made traveling in the United States difficult, and in other parts of the world difficult. And so, generally speaking, it created a lot of, worse than animosity, it created a lot of hatred, and it created a lot of violence, not just here in the States, but in other areas. And it is what caused our involvement in the United States involvement in Afghanistan, where we spent 20 years and having lost, 50,000 soldiers. Maybe it wasn't that much, but far more than, and we didn't accomplish anything in being there, and as it turns out. So it was a troublesome time, and some people took advantage of the circumstances to prove their point. People that had hate anyway, it gave them argument to hate and to victimize certain people. Not a pretty time.
Some people had family or friends that died in these attacks. I asked him if he did.
No, I was at the end of the year, the bank that I was working for, actually the beginning of each year in January, we would have a dinner, and all the employees would come, and it was this is what we're going to do this year, and what we want to achieve and so on. And they would have a guest speaker, and it wasn't that year. I think it was 2 years later, about 2003. The guest speaker was a blind man. He had a dog, a service dog. I think his dog's name was Faith, a German Shepherd, and he worked in one of the towers. I don't remember now if it was Tower 1 or Tower 2. When he was there the day that plane hit, and he was, floor 35 or 40, somewhere in there. He wasn't at the top. And when the plane crashed, he couldn't use the elevators. He's blind. He's got to navigate 35 floors or whatever on the stairs, and he's totally blind. And so his navigation out of the building was his dog, and the dog went with him everywhere. I mean, it was constant. And the point of his message at the dinner was he had to put his faith in his dog, and that when you do that, you put your life in. He had to put his life in his dog's hand, and the dog would navigate him down. But they'd run into walls. He wouldn't know how many steps he had to go. run into people, probably ran into bodies, run into firemen that are coming up the stairs, broken glass, furniture, all the obstacles that you can think of. And he would talk about feeling a gust of wind when he's going down the stairs, because as he gets to one floor, well, the windows are all blown out. So the wind's coming in, and being familiar with the building itself, and he might want to, okay, there's air coming in over there. That means maybe that's a good place to go. And his dog wouldn't let him, because the dog knew that the way to safety was, he knew that the way to safety was to follow his dog. I haven't read the book, but he probably talks about it in the book, that there were probably times he could hardly breathe because of the smoke. There were times when he could feel the heat from the fires. Yeah, talk about trust and faith, and as we've all heard so many times in our Christian faith, that it lends a different description or a different understanding of walking blind. I can't remember his name, but he was a Christian, and that was part of his message, his belief. Put your trust in someone, like he had put his trust in his dog, and that was the message to us at the bank, was put your trust in your leaders, those that are going to guide you. He had touched a lot of people with his experience and the message that he brought with his experience of trust and faith. Other than Todd Beamer being on the Pennsylvania flight, and I can't remember the name of the one that was killed in the Pentagon. Watched him play football, didn't know him. Or the only, and I didn't know any of those people, but those are the only ones that I can think of that you might say I knew about. It's still singed into my mind. Every September there's a 2-hour special on 9/11, and it's to the point where I can't even watch it anymore, because what a horrible thing is that, to be in the position, realize that you're going to die, and that you make the decision to jump out of a window 60 stories up. And you see that on the films.
Now, obviously, 9/11 was a major tragedy for our nation's history, and I don't want to take away from the fact that it was. But I wanted to ask my grandpa if he believed that there was any positives that came out of this.
Well, I think just Hingston in itself is positive. That the opportunity that he had and has to speak about faith and trust and share his belief with literally tens of thousands of people. It highlighted for some of us our ignorance and our biases and our dislikes for other people. It highlights, in Christian terms, what my sin is. That Billy Graham used to say, don't criticize the other person's belief. Just present your belief to them. You're not going to change their mind by criticizing the fact that they're Muslim or Buddhist or whatever. All you should be doing is presenting Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit is the one that will get them to change their mind.
Yeah.
And even though what Billy Graham was saying wasn't new, I mean, he'd been saying that for years, that I believe was a good thing that came out of this, was that it gave some people the opportunity to re-examine their beliefs and the way that they present their beliefs to a sinful world. I suppose to some degree or another, in almost all tragedies, you can find good if you look hard enough.
In 2003, NASA discovered one of the oldest known exoplanets, naming it Methuselah. It's about 12.7 billion years old and over 12,000 light years away from Earth.
I didn't know that. I marvel at all of that. I mean, I can't even imagine being able to do those calculations, arrive at that calculation. I couldn't even begin to argue about it if I wanted to. I mean, I'll assume that it's true.
I'll spare you from the whole tangent we went on, trying to calculate how long it would take to travel to this exoplanet, trying to put it into a more understandable concept of time and distance for us.
You haven't got enough numbers to do that. Too many zeros. A long time. The James Webb Telescope. It's giving us pictures of a planet. It's not even alive today.
Yeah.
We're seeing it when it was alive billions of years ago, or whatever it was.
In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the coastal areas of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, killing more than 1,600 people.
I remember that. It was so bad because there'd been so much damage, and there was so much of that area was underwater and was going to be underwater anywhere from a long time to forever. And so people, they couldn't return home. I mean, ever. They lost their jobs, they lost family, they lost everything. And even at our church, in Fresno, we're 2,000 miles, 1,800 miles away from New Orleans. We had people coming to Fresno, coming to our church to live, and the church helped them out. And, you can imagine something happening to your family, lose a brother or two, or a sister, or a parent, and have nowhere to go except this group of people 2,000 miles away said, "Hey, come live with us. We'll help you out. We'll find a job for you. We'll get diapers for your kids. Whatever." And so it was a significant tragedy for the country, and specifically with those people. And that was happening. I mean, there were churches and communities all over the United States opening their doors to the people that had lost everything. There were stories about they got so much rain in New Orleans that caskets were floating in the cemetery areas of New Orleans that is still affected by Katrina. They've put in new levees and built stronger and bigger, higher levee walls and gates, and I don't understand all of it, but they've engineered a lot of things to prevent that from happening again.
In 2007, Apple announced and released the first iPhone product.
We probably had a cell phone prior to that. Connie, she probably had a cell phone prior to that. But that's probably when she bought the first small cell phone, without the big antenna and all that. And I would guess either your father or Mark probably helped her do that. And I didn't get my cell phone until, I want to say, about 2 years before she died. And she died in 2011. So that would have been 2009 or thereabouts.
In the same year, the Great Recession began and lasted for about 2 years. It was a severe global economic downturn caused mainly by banks giving out too many risky loans for mortgages and auto financing. This led to a financial collapse, making it the most significant financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s.
Very much aware of all of that, because it affected me in several respects, because I owned a home, I owned a cabin. At that time.
When did you retire?
2017.
Okay, yeah. So then you would have still been working at the bank.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And in 2007, I can't remember, had a house, had a cabin at Shaver Lake, and had at least one rental, maybe two. I can't remember. And so, and the Great Recession was tied primarily to real estate.
Right.
And so I had 3 or 4 pieces of property, and that affected the value of those, which meant it affected how much I could sell them for or borrow on them. And the primary effect was the job that I had, collecting on debts that were bad, kept me employed. So I was, in one respect, I was grateful.
Yeah.
I mean, not that my job was never in jeopardy even before then, but that assured me. And so, I had to work with a lot of people that were hurt by the recession. I had to carry a big stick, so to speak, on other people that were affected by the recession. They couldn't make the payments on their house. They had lost their jobs. I had to repossess automobiles. I had to foreclose on houses and businesses. At the same time, my investments, my retirement took a big hit.
Yeah.
I lost half of my retirement. I wasn't retired yet, but my investment in my retirement funds, at one point I'd lost 60% of it.
Wow.
It didn't really affect me because I wasn't selling anything. I wasn't disposing of any investments. So it's just paper.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but it was money I couldn't grow because it was deflating in value.
Right.
It all came back 5 years later, something like that. Just before we sold our home in Madeira in 1999. Sold it for $215,000. When the Great Recession started, that value of that house was over $500,000. In a sense, I had sold something that now was worth $285,000 more than I sold it for. So I didn't lose anything because I didn't own it.
Right.
So it wasn't mine to lose. But if I'd have kept it, I would have been that much richer,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But today, that house is worth probably $500,000.
Wow.
So in 15 years, it's gone up $285,000. But in the meantime, it had dropped. It never dropped below what I sold it for. We sold it for. But again, because I didn't own it, I didn't lose anything. I didn't make anything.
Yeah.
I sold it for more than I owed or had in it. And I used that money to buy another house. And we had done that before the Great Recession anyway, 8 years prior. So the Great Recession did not affect me negatively at all, other than my paper losses on my retirement, but it was a good time for me to be employed doing what I was doing. And from an enjoyment of my job, it was a good time. I mean, I enjoyed my work. I enjoyed that time. And one of those years, I contributed to the bank's profits more than anybody else. Provided more income to the bank's profits than all other parts of the bank combined.
Dang.
The bank, and I think it was 2008 or 9, I contributed. The bank made less than $2 million for the whole year, and I contributed more than $1 million of that. Well, my department. I had, at that time, I had 3 people working with me. Two people. I can speak to the recession, but I don't have any personal negativeness about it. The times were good to me in other ways as well.
I asked him how my grandma Connie's job was affected by it.
She retired. She retired from the county about 2000, 2001. When she retired from the hospital, she went to work for a home health care agency that she ran. She was the regional guru. She was the head honcho. And she worked for them for, I want to say, 2 years. And they were out of Nashville or Memphis or somewhere in the Southeast. They ended up filing a bankruptcy. And so she lost her job because of the bankruptcy. But she had started collecting her retirement. So income-wise, we were fat, dumb, and happy. Because she was getting her retirement. I was still working, and she had this other job, had income, didn't affect her retirement at all.
Right.
After she wound down, because of the bankruptcy, she wound down the company here in the valley. and then went to work for a health clinic down in Easton or in South Fresno. And she worked for them she was the head nurse, and nursing administrator for 2 or 3 years. And then the lymphoma came, and so she retired, not because of the lymphoma, because that was in the early stages of her cancer. Mm-hmm. She was still healthy, but she resigned from the health clinic, and then just did volunteer stuff at church and Young Life, and that was probably about 2008, I want to say. Maybe 2007 or 2008, might have been early 2009. Some in that time frame is when she retired for sure, and didn't get paid for it, but became the administrator at our church. But financially, no, the recession did not affect us at all.
In 2009, President Barack Obama became the first black president. I was curious what my grandpa thought of him, just as a president overall.
Didn't vote for him. Not much to say. I didn't particularly like him as president, but I only had one vote, so that's all I was entitled to.
We started talking about Obama's competition. In the first election he won, he was up against John McCain. In the second, it was Mitt Romney.
The big knock on Mitt Romney was, for a lot of people, he was Mormon, and that was well known that he was Mormon. And I believe he probably lost the election in large part because of that. A lot of people across the country, just wouldn't vote for somebody that was a Mormon. Nothing against his politics. And it was like in the 1918 or 1922 or somewhere in there, people wouldn't vote for Smith, was his last name, because he was Jewish for president. And a lot of people wouldn't vote for John Kennedy because he was Catholic. I think those days are in the United States are pretty much gone, that we obviously would vote for a Catholic because Kennedy was Catholic and Biden is Catholic. I don't think we've had a Jewish president yet, but people didn't want to vote for Ronald Reagan, some people, because he had been divorced.
Really?
Yeah. He had been divorced 25 or 30 years earlier than when he became president. Donald Trump's been married 3 times, so or divorced twice. So that's not a criteria anymore either. But I mean, Obama's he won fair and square. He became president. I'd have rather had somebody else, but like I said, I only got to vote once.
He shared his perspective of how politics in the U.S. have changed over his lifetime.
Politics in the United States today is abominable and so far from what it was even 20 years ago. It's wrong, just plain wrong. And it doesn't, logic and common sense doesn't seem to have anything to do with a person's political persuasion.
You're shouting so much that you're not listening. So
good way of putting it.
Yeah. The Avatar movie became the highest grossing movie of all time in 2009.
To me, I think the whole thing is silly and misleading and almost dishonest. To say it's the highest grossing movie of all time, well, the price to see that movie is $2 more. I'm making this up now.
Yeah.
$2 more a ticket than it was 5 years ago. Because of the increase in prices, next year you're going to have something else that's going to be the highest grossing.
Yeah.
And the year after that, maybe not every year, but
Yeah.
So to me it's a meaningless thing. 40 years ago, when I took your dad to see Star Wars, and that was probably 1983 or somewhere in there. Tickets were probably $7. So, almost half the cost. A more meaningful statistic would be the number of attendance. The other thing that I think is misleading is that movies today make money with different venues than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. I don't know how quickly Avatar can be watched on television or some other method. So but let's take Titanic, for example. Okay, at the time that it came out, the only real source of income would be the theaters. But today, Titanic still grosses more money because they sell it to a TV channel. They sell it through videos, through tapes. Not so much now as they used to, but there are different venues for movies today than there was 20, 30 years ago. How they calculate that into the gross sales, I don't know. But again, it's misleading to say it's the highest grossing ever or the fourth highest ever,
right,
when that income comes from different sources today than it used to.
Thank you so much for listening to the 6th episode of this project. In the 7th episode, we'll be discussing the 2010s decade. Stories about my grandma's fight against cancer, the Boston Marathon bombings, and ISIS with their rise to power. We'll also be covering a few more recent events, such as retirement, COVID-19, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The history in this podcast series was fact-checked by Jeffrey Copeland, sound design by Bihoy Ahmed, video backgrounds by Nathaniel Agueros, and the episodes were directed and edited by me, Josiah Freeland. A special thank you to my grandpa, Steve Freeland, for letting me share his stories and perspectives. This production was made possible in part by the Community Media Access Collaborative.
Just before 2:50 p.m., this is the viewpoint seen by many of the 26,000 marathon runners who are approaching the finish line. The first of the two explosions rocks the sidewalk along the course. White smoke blasting into the air, blowing metal barricades into the street, spewing shrapnel into crowds gathered at the finish.